Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1997 action sequel, Speed 2, Cruise Control. More like snooze control, because this film is boring. It's so boring and tedious and slow. This is honestly one of the slowest action films I can think of off the top of my head. Uh, and it's crazy because it's such a massive contrast in comparison to the first Speed. The first Speed is one of the fastest, quickest paced action films that I've ever seen. And then Speed 2 Cruise Control is like Speed if it was stuck in neutral for 2 hours. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I want to give a special shout out yet again to Movie Man for requesting this review. Now, Speed 2 Cruise Control is directed by Jan de Bont, who directed the first Speed, and I think he did a genuinely spectacular job directing that film. I can't say the same about Speed 2. And a big part of that is because Jan de Bont didn't want to direct Speed 2. He only directed this because he was contractually obligated to do so. And it's painfully obvious that that's the case. From the opening shots all the way down to the bulk of the scenes on the cruise ship, and even the sequence involving the lifeboats, the direction is just nowhere near as full of the same octane or the same spirited energy that the first film had. And you could just tell that Jan de Bont was not interested in the movie that he was doing. You could just tell that he was not passionate about it, and the only time he really was passionate about directing the movie was when he got to direct what would go on to become the most expensive stunt in film history, with the scene at the end when the cruise ship smashes into the port and crashes through this town at the end of the movie. But other than that, Jan de Bont, his heart wasn't in it, and it was very clear that that was the case. A lot of shots in this just are very lazy, uninspired. The same energy, or even the same kind of camera angles or variety of directing styles that Jan de Bont utilized in Speed and in Twister prior to Speed 2 is nowhere to be found in this film. It's honestly hard to believe the same director who directed Speed and Twister directed this movie, because it just doesn't look like it's from the same guy. And the best that I can say in terms of this direction is the very few moments where there's any amount of actual action or spectacle, Jan de Bont seems to still get up for that. But there isn't a lot of that in Speed 2. So there's a lot of shots of just characters wandering around the cruise ship, or just scenes involving people schmoozing and perusing the cruise ship, or the bad guy setting up things and enabling his plan, and that's really it. The bulk of the action is all at the end of the movie. It's a very top-heavy film, and or bottom-heavy movie, and it's just one of those films where the direction is lethargic, it's slow, and it's disappointing. It really is. And this was the start of Jan de Bont's pretty significant decline as well, because Jan started out with Speed and Twister, and had a tremendous start to his career, and then he just completely sank with this film and just kept sinking all the way down to the bottom with films like The Haunting remake and the Laura Croft sequel. So, yeah, it's a film that in a lot of ways is very bittersweet. And one of those ways is watching Jan de Bont just flounder and flail and just completely flop with his direction for this film. The screenplay is by Randall McCormick and Jeff Nathanson. I don't think Jeff did a whole lot. I think he was, a co-writer of this, but I don't think he was that involved with this screenplay. But I don't know for sure. All I know though is that both of these writers combined did a really pathetic and a really bad job writing this sequel. First off, there was no need for a Speed 2 to begin with, and that's already a problem that any Speed sequel is going to face. But at least you would want to maintain the same kind of adrenaline, the same kind of intense thrills as the first movie. But no. Instead, most of the film takes place on a slow moving cruise ship because that was Jan de Bont's idea. So that's another thing that goes back to Jan, actually, is because he was the one that wanted to have it take place on a cruise ship because of some experience that he had involving a cruise ship. And so he felt that that would be a good setting for the sequel. And it was not. Some of the other plans were like a film taking place on a plane. That would have been very derivative at the time, but that still would have been better. I think another one had to do with, I think, like a train or a subway train or something along those lines. The problem with Speed is that once you get to the point when you've already showcased the bullet train or the subway train, and like in the climax of the first movie, you have a fast car and a fast bus. Where can you really go from there in terms of the concept and the idea and having a film centered around something that goes really fast, otherwise it's going to explode? So instead, what you have is a sequel that just basically carries over one of the main characters from Speed, if you're not counting Joe Morton's character, who has a small cameo in this. So it's essentially focusing more on Annie and making her the star, and then bringing in some other guy to replace Keanu Reeves's character, Jack Traven. And the focus on Annie is already a mistake from the first 5 minutes, because the start of the movie is just one long series of bad bits of comedy involving Annie, who is doing a driving test with Tim Conway and failing spectacularly. And while she's failing her driving test, you get some idea of what happened after the events of Speed and what happened in particular between Annie and Jack. And the whole way that these two writers write Jack Traven is insulting. They write him as a moron who doesn't seem to know what he's doing or what he's getting into when it comes to his relationship with Annie. They set things up for their breakup in the most incredulous way. They broke up because Jack didn't understand her, and Jack bought some pepper spray for her birthday or for Christmas, and she was so dumb she thought that it was perfume and pepper sprayed herself, and then that's what led to them breaking up. And of course, it quotes the line from the first movie, relationships under extreme circumstances don't work. And I'm like, okay, but not this way. Like, I don't buy that Jack Traven would buy her pepper spray for the holidays or for her birthday. I don't buy that at all. That doesn't seem like something that Jack would have done. The whole writing for Jack is insulting and a slap in the face. And from the very beginning, the movie is just irritating. And you're only like 5 minutes in. You're like, great, I already hate this. And then you get the first action sequence of the movie, which is barely even what I would consider to be an action scene. It's a really lame, boring motorcycle chase with Jack's replacement, Alex Shaw, chasing after this like ice cream truck that has like a bunch of stolen electronics in it, and the guys in the back of the truck are throwing out boxes of electronics, and Shaw is narrowly avoiding the boxes, and it's a really lame and just boring chase. And then Annie completely fails her driving test around the same time. And Annie and Alex then decide to go on a cruise, to take a load off, take a break from things. And once you get onto the cruise, then things just get to the point where there's just a complete dearth of action for a really large chunk of the film. So then the movie starts to feel like it's a dirge. And you have the whole stuff with Annie and and Alex trying to propose to her, but he keeps getting stopped by, something that Annie wants to do, or it's not the right point in time to do it. And there's all these different passengers on the cruise ship that are introduced one by one, and most of them are either comic relief or pretty much useless. Like these parents of this deaf kid who winds up being a pretty significant character for some reason in the movie. It's not like I think that it's necessarily a bad thing that you have representation for disabled people. It's just her character adds nothing to the movie, and she just becomes a girl who needs to be rescued at one point, and that's really all that she adds to it. Uh, and her parents are just dumbasses, so that really doesn't help that whole storyline at all. You have this photographer guy who's just one out of many attempts at having multiple characters who are just there for comic relief, but the problem is none of them are funny. And then you have the villain in Geiger, who is some guy who worked for the company that built the cruise ship, and he designed all the computers and everything and the computer programs. And because of the work that he was doing, he got really sick, and then the company fired him instead of giving him a compensation package. So now he wants revenge, and his idea of revenge is to take over the ship and then stall it for long enough so then he can steal the jewelry on board. So he's just a petty thief who's just a computer nerd. Wow, great. You go from the brilliant bomb expert Howard Payne in the first film to Kane, who's just some disgruntled ex-employee computer nerd who just wants to steal some jewels. who for some reason puts leeches on himself because I guess that helps with his blood disease somehow. Because I guess this is the time in the Middle Ages, and leeches actually are providing some kind of cure instead of just being a bunch of bullshit. It's kind of fitting because Speed 2 is very much a leech off of the success of Speed. And there's just so many scenes in this first 40 to 50 minutes that are just boring or cringe. Like this scene with Annie talking about how she wants to boogie, and all these really bad attempts to try to be funny with these comic relief characters. And then Geiger eventually takes over. And the way that he takes over, I'm like, how the hell did one guy do all of this? I understand that he's a computer genius and he set up the computer programs that control the ship, but it still is honestly something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The way that he takes out the captain is lame because the captain could easily get out of the way of the thing that ultimately knocks him into the water. But just for the convenience of the plot and the script, he gets knocked into the water. Geiger needs to put a like a tracking device of some kind in the control room, like in the the main room where the captain and his aide are there. And so he just acts like he's drunk, stumbles in there, and puts this giant ass brick of a fucking piece of machinery or this tracking device. It looks like it's the size of a brick, and he smacks it underneath one of the tables. And I'm like, how the hell did nobody in that room notice that shit? So all these different things have to go into place in the most incredulous and asinine fashion in order for Geiger's plan to actually work. Eventually it works, and he gets the ship to stall and stop in the water, and then he starts stealing jewelry. And then he sets things up to get everybody off the ship. But then that plan goes awry because Shaw realizes pretty quickly that something's fishy. And so he winds up getting everybody back on board. But not before there's like an incredibly long and just really slow and boring rescue sequence involving all these people on this lifeboat who are slowly falling towards the sea. And once Shaw winds up rescuing everybody, then him and Annie do their part to try to help the other people on on board the ship. And Annie uses a chainsaw at one point to saw open a door, so then some of the other survivors can get out. Shaw decides to use the help of Giuliano and Merced to like flood the ship. And of course, when he does that, the deaf girl, she's still on the ship somewhere, trapped in an elevator. So then she has to get rescued by Shaw. Shaw gets trapped in one room at one point by Geiger because he's trying to go after Geiger, but Geiger outsmarts him. I'd rather be watching either Geiger movie than Speed 2. So I guess so in my subconscious it was like Geiger. No, I think you mean Guyver. But yeah, Geiger outsmarts Shaw, locks him in a room, and then ultimately he gets let out by Annie and Giuliano. And there's a whole thing about the door has a grenade on it, and I still don't understand how the grenade was diffused. You see the scene where they take the grenade out and they pull the pin out, but you never see the pin put back in. You never see the grenade thrown into another room or thrown out the off the ship and then it explodes. So as far as I know, were carrying a live grenade that should have blown them up because this script is just so bad. And then the finale is a slow moving cruise ship that slowly avoids a oil tanker and then crashes into a port town slowly. But I will give the film this and the story this. At least that is something that is memorable, like this big giant cruise ship smashing into a port and crashing through an entire town, and it's all done practically. Like, okay, all right, that is at least a memorable and somewhat exciting action sequence. And then after that, Geiger, well, actually during that whole sequence, Geiger has already kidnapped Annie, taken him with him, and Shaw then goes after him and chases after Geiger, who is now commandeered a plane, and Shaw finds a way to get on the plane before it completely takes off and uh, beats the crap out of Geiger and saves Annie. And then Geiger's plane gets trapped on like a crow's nest on the oil tanker, and then the oil tanker explodes along with Geiger. And that would have been okay if the way that it was written wasn't so silly. Like he's just trapped on the crow's nest, and then he like giggles like a maniac, and then looks down, makes a silly face, and then he explodes. Oh, and I can't forget the cameo by the one character, Maurice, who had the sports car in Speed. He's in this too at the end, and he helps Annie and Alex with Geiger and stopping the bad guy. And Annie and Alex escape from the explosion on Maurice's boat. And the explosion of the oil tanker was well done too. I mean, it was a massive explosion. In all honesty, like the last 10 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, when there's just nonstop action and explosions and a cruise ship smashing through an entire town, if the entirety of the script and the entirety of the film was like that, and it was that crazy and that action packed, this might not have been that bad. Because the idea of an action film taking place on a cruise ship is not necessarily the worst idea in the world. It's just a bad idea and a bad fit for a speed film. So Geiger is blown sky high, and then the film ends with Alex and Annie uh, talking about getting married, and then I think Annie says something along the lines of, "Oh, but I get to choose the where we go for the honeymoon," and I'm just like, God, this just sucked. This was so bad, and the major problem I have with this script is it's just boring. It's snooze inducing, and it moves way too slow. The first 40 minutes or so are actually more like the first hour of the movie is just a whole lot of nothing happening. Just a lot of setup and not much of a payoff. And then when you eventually get to something happening, it's too late because you're already either fast asleep or you're about to doze off, or you got one eye open and the other one is closed because you're just so bored. And just the way that it tries to loosely connect to speed, it is also very insulting. I hated how the writers wrote Jack Traven as a character and set things up for his breakup with Annie. And Annie as a character is also written in a way where she's not very likable either. So that's a serious problem. And it's not like Alex Shaw is really written in a way that is that interesting or engaging either. He's written as a poor man's Jack Traven. That's really how he's written. And Geiger is just a really generic bad guy. So even the villain isn't written in a way that is that compelling. It's just a bad script. And the cast, it's not great either. Sandra Bullock, she's gorgeous as always. She definitely has the same kind of spunk that she had in Speed, but you can tell that she really didn't want to do this. You can tell that she didn't believe in most of her dialogue. You can tell that she didn't really do this for more than just a paycheck. In fact, Sandra herself even admits that. So it's like, oh yeah, I really just did this for the money. It's one of the biggest pieces of crap ever made. Like even Sandra Bullock is like, yeah, this movie sucked. And Jason Patric, I don't mind Jason Patric as an actor in other things, but in this film as an action star, he was awful. He had no charisma, he had no chemistry with Sandra Bullock, and he was not believable as a badass cop. To go from Keanu Reeves to Jason Patric is just such a downgrade. And he was just another reason why this was so boring, because he was such a boring co-star. And Willem Dafoe was trying, he was making a lot of cartoonish looking faces, but at least he's trying to have some fun, and he's not the problem. It's just his character sucked. What can Willem Dafoe really do with this? I mean, he's given a character who's just a disgruntled employee who stops the ship and is a computer nerd and just wants to steal some jewels. That's all that his character is. Doesn't have any memorable lines of dialogue, barely does anything when it comes to like how he takes out anybody on the ship. I don't know why he didn't have a team of people. I don't get that at all. Like just making him the only guy that's doing everything is not only lazy, but it's also incredibly lame and limiting. And forgive me, apparently I can't say the word limiting. It's probably because I'm just stretched to my limits when it comes to talking about this movie. Then you have Tamara Morrison, who plays Giuliano, and he's fine, but he's not really given a ton to do in this. But at least he's given more to do than Brian McCarty as Merced, who just has a very unconvincing Scottish accent throughout the movie, to the point where I felt like he was just trying to do his best impression of Scotty from Star Trek. And the rest of the cast, like, what can I really say? I mean, I like Bo Svensson as the captain, but he's in it for like maybe one or two scenes, and that's it. Then you have like a singer named Tamia, who has like her first ever acting role in this as Sherry, and it was also her last because she didn't act again. You got Lois Chiles, from Creepshow 2. She plays a character named Celeste, and it's a nothing role. Colleen Camp is also in it in a nothing role. You got Joe Morton, who has an uncredited cameo as Mac, Lieutenant Mac from the first movie. Glenn Palmer is back as Maurice. It's just not a very great cast. But then again, I can't blame a lot of these cast members because the script sucks so much. What can they really do to keep it afloat? And then you have the cinematography by Jack N. Green, which honestly looks like the efforts of a greenhorn cinematographer who just really needs to learn the ropes. And what's crazy is like he's a guy who worked on a lot of movies prior to this, but it just looks like the effort of somebody who's a total greenhorn. The editing by Alan Cody is atrocious in more than one instance. Like it's some really bad editing, and it really hurts the film in a ton of different ways, especially when it comes to any of the scenes that are trying to be packed full of any amount of suspense or tension. And the music by Mark Mancina is okay, but it's nowhere near as good as his score for the first film. I don't understand why anybody is saying that this score is better than the score for the first. I don't understand that. The best parts of it are just different pieces that are copied from the first film. Adding a Caribbean flavor to the score of the first movie doesn't make it superior to the score for the first Speed. That's not true. That's not even remotely close to being accurate, if you ask me. And this film is just way too slow, way too long. It's waterlogged from beginning to end for the most part, and it drowns you in drowsiness for its 126-minute runtime, and its budget is astronomical. Like it costs the estimates are 110 to 160 million dollars. And the only time that's on the screen is when it comes to that scene when the cruise ship collides with that town that's on the port. Other than that, that budget is not on the screen. So I don't understand that budget at all. That's like 3 times or 4 times as much as the budget for the first movie. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say about Speed 2 snooze control other than this is a great example of a completely unnecessary sequel and how you make an action thriller that doesn't have the right amount of thrills or the right amount of action and is just poorly done. Yeah, this movie sucked. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Speed 2. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.